You are listening to TMI for the week of September 17th, 2018.
We got a chance this week to speak to Kevin Weber, and then later we're joined by Ian Stolberg in Ottawa. What have you been watching in Canadian news the last couple of weeks? Anything? Is it boring, Canadian news?
Well, it does get, you know that Bugs Bunny cartoon with the big bulldog and the little tiny bowler hatted wearing yappy guy, you know, kind of shut up, smack. And Canadian news and Canadian politics is generally the yappy little cousin to the big leviathan of American news. I think certainly of late, less so normally, I think, but of late it's been hard to take your eyes off anything but the ceaselessly chummed waters of American culture. And, you know, what's going to happen? What's happening now? What just happened?
The last news story I saw from Doug Ford was that he was passing legislation in the legislature to make it easier to quickly pass bills. So, that's a little bit alarming.
Yeah.
Just imagine a fast-track road to neoconservatism.
Mm-hmm.
Would you explain the Notwithstanding clause implications of what Doug Ford's proposing?
I don't think so. I don't have a clear understanding myself. I just know that it's
a buzzword for an exception. The Notwithstanding clause. And what was the issue that he was objecting to? Do you know?
He was objecting to the judge's ruling that what he was planning to do with downsizing of Toronto City Council in 3 months before, 3 months before the election was unconstitutional and constituted a serious impediment to the voting public's rights to understand and access information in a fair and balanced manner. And I don't see how that can be taken any other way. And you look at a really good allegory to what's going on there is all of the different judges in the states that have thrown up judicial roadblocks to Muslim bans and sanctuary cities and all of the things that Donald Trump has tried to do, the health care, kind of almost everything he's tried to do. There's been a local judge, circuit judge, I don't know what level of judge they are, that said, you know what, issued a cease and desist, or let's just, slow this the hell down. And that is what this judge here in Canada did, right? And I'm over the past year, I've been thinking, okay, well, this is the only check and balance that exists currently that seems to continue to function in the States. You've got these judicial checks and balances that seem to work, and it's nice to see them working here in Canada as well. And then this thuggish tube steak pulls this clause out of the provincial constitution, which everyone from the writers to the most recent users of the Constitution say that this is not what it's meant to do.
And when it was invoked by Quebec, it was to help them protect their culture.
Yeah.
To defend French over English, to preserve the language and culture of French people.
No, see, I don't see that. That's an interesting point. I did not know whether that Notwithstanding clause was part of the provincial constitution, if there is such a thing, or whether it's the provincial government accessing a part of the national constitution, in which case, yeah, you're probably right. It was the same thing that Quebec was doing. And, whether I agree with it or not, I mean, on a far more worthy...
No, and I think it's something that a premier can invoke. So was it a federal court judge that overturned?
Thought it was a provincial.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't have needed to go...
Consult the federal government over a municipal issue, really.
Yeah. I mean, if
So it's just more Trump stuff, where you just pull stuff out of this and that, buzzwords, things that flash in the dark, and with no respect for the historical nature of the idea of notwithstanding.
Everybody outside the city of Toronto, basically. I don't know whether about Ottawa and stuff like that, but I don't think anyone in Toronto voted for him. And it seems like it's really, really hard to talk yourself out of the fact that how many stories have you heard about, kind of old cons telling, people going into prison, kind of you need to make your bones by going up to the biggest guy in the yard and knocking him down, right? And if Doug Ford, if he can slap Toronto down, who else is going to actually step up? If I can smack Toronto down, what chance has Goderich or Smith Falls or even Ottawa? It's hard to imagine that it's anything but retribution for the people who messed with him and his
right,
inebriated.
So for the listeners, so it was Rob Ford who was a city council, and that city council has about 40 some odd or 50 47 seats, and he's proposing to knock it down to 23. He went to LA and justified doing so because LA had only 23, but it turns out they really have something like 97. And the Toronto didn't take kindly for Rob Ford's, which is known all over the world, his shenanigans and inappropriate public statements, which is so much in line with this movement towards a Trump-like universe that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And what better way to get back at those councillors and the city
than to relieve them of their access to the public teat? I'd always thought, as much as I found Rob Ford to be cartoonishly obnoxious. I always thought his brother Doug was the malevolency. There was something dark and ominous about him. I had no problem seeing Rob as the one that, kind of had a little coterie of hangers-on. He was like a football guy in high school, and probably was blonde and pretty and wealthy, and probably had a big circle of friends in the way that high school certain social cliques do. And I can very easily see him kind of like pushing people into lockers and laughing, and then leaving them. But I could very easily see his brother Doug coming up behind him and, kind of opening the locker and then punching the person and locking them in. I mean, there's all the stories about him being, kind of a drug dealer and just, kind of moving around shark-like in the back of his brother's shinier wake. And that's just the energy I get from Doug Ford. That one night when he got elected, he had that big smile on his face, and it just looked, first of all, it looked foreign. It didn't look comfortable on his face, but he just reminds me of one of those small town southern sheriffs from a movie about kind of white liberal students driving their VW minibus through the South on the way to explore America, and they get pulled over and deliverenced. He's just
White male privilege does seem to have a uniform, doesn't it?
It does, and it's so often it's replete in kind of rolls of fat and intimidation, and I think he's bad news. And the fact that one of the first things he does out of the gate is do something so obviously, flagrantly, on the basic, on the simplest level, it's inconsiderate. Even people who are politically non-literate, who really don't know the mechanics of how an election works, realizes that the logistics of changing directions 3 months in is inconsiderate to the people involved, let alone the voting public. What would be the problem with, kind of letting this election go through, and if you wanted to wait for, if you really thought this was a big deal, call a special by-election, or, kind of wait for the next election.
Well, it's a very Trump-like move. It's a bomb. It's a chaos bomb.
Yeah.
Just a bomb of chaos. Blow something up and see where the pieces fall.
Did you, I forget, you are or you are not a fan of Game of Thrones?
Yeah, I haven't seen any of it.
Okay, well, there's a character who's a little weaselly, but he's kind of like one of these Grand Vizier manipulators behind the circus. His name is Lord Peter Baelish, and he comes from a part of Westeros, which is the imaginary land, called Littlefingers, which is long, thin isthmuses of land, and that's what they call him, Littlefinger. And in the first season, he's one of the prime movers behind all the machinations that are going around, people dying and kind of political things upending and exploding, and he, in a moment of quiet reflection, says to someone, "Chaos is a ladder, right? And I've always climbed it to success." And I had the strongest image. If I had the computer graphics ability to do this, I would have created a poster or something on Facebook or a T-shirt or something that had a picture of Donald Trump, and I would have said, "Lord Donald," and little brackets, Littlefingers, "Chaos is a ladder." And that's exactly seems to be his philosophy. There have been dozens, if not hundreds, of things which would have brought down any other prior politician, but the only reason that they have not is because things have just continued. There's another explosion. Look over there, Jesus! I mean, you can't draw focus when there's you'd like to focus on a single event, but Trump's presidency is such a target-rich environment that there's nothing you can really draw focus on for the length of time required to actually take action.
I'm working on a sort of mental model that I haven't really been able to refine. It seems to me like because no matter what he says, Trump, he can't hurt his base. I've been wondering if, and something that sort of triggered me on this is the taking a knee or all the indoctrination that goes on, for example, at a football game. Mm-hmm. And it's one thing to sing the national anthem or salute the flag or whatever, but they've got flybys and thanking the military, and when you look at the statistics, let's say for U.S. football, or Cambridge Analytica, or something's happened. Somebody's figured out if we can shift this demographic, let's say, to a position, and then take another one, sports nuts, and shift them on top of that, and then take a certain brand of maybe Facebook culture, and just that it was taking maybe 4 or 5 things that separated didn't seem to make waves. But if you could overlap them, so if you take people who don't really read, you slide them on top of football players, and then you take very Republican demographic, and bringing them together under one umbrella is the magic.
That is the magic of political movements, because you find, I think in Trump's case, it's alchemical how he's taken people and convinced them that voting against their own interest is in their interest.
Yeah. How
he can stand in front of a crowd of people and decry and BMW, right? We're gonna fuck the, we're gonna mess up BMW. We're gonna tax them and slap tariffs on them, and you see all the people driving BMWs. Who doesn't own a BMW, right? And he's talking to these people in the back of Bork in South Carolina about what a bad impact BMW, for example, BMW and Mercedes specifically, but in this, for the purposes of this discussion, BMW. He's talking about the negative impact that German cars have on local cultures and local economies, but he doesn't take into consideration that in the case that this conversation he was having at a rally in South Carolina was 100 miles away from Spartansburg, a town in South Carolina that is the largest producer of BMW vehicles in the world. More BMWs are produced in South Carolina. I think it's South Carolina. It might be North Carolina, someplace called Spartansburg. But more BMWs are produced in the States than they are in Germany. So, Donald Trump just gloms on to these low information voters who just respond to a tagline, and they've made being a low information voter a tagline of success. There's no longer any celebration of intellect. Intellect is, an affectation. In a world where, you get your news in the 7 seconds while you're waiting for a bus, or you're waiting for the Starbucks line to move ahead, or sitting at the gas station. You consume the world in bites, 15, 20 seconds. Who needs to value sustained application of intellect? It's I'm too busy working to feed my family to read a book, all right, or think a thought, follow a series of thoughts to a logical conclusion and construct an argument in defense of that conclusion. No, that's no longer, that's something to be celebrated in Donald Trump's America, and it's truly disheartening that I don't know if it was intended to be so, but I mean, there was that movie Idiocracy that came out just before or just after Donald Trump won the election, and it's like, oh my God, that's the future. If you couple that with Handmaid's Tale, that's the future. Unless something remarkable happens in the next 55 days at the midterm election, if women and people of color and Democratic voters and enlightened Republicans get off their ass and don't get off their ass and don't vote for somebody in this midterm election, who knows where things are going to end.
Well, I have an overly simplified and cynical model, and that is, this idea, who would you rather have a beer with, leads to who would you vote for. and that I had a theory that it was just whomever is the most entertaining figure. If they voted for him because he was the most entertaining, then the cynical part of me asks, would you find it more entertaining watching him squirm in office? I just wonder if the ingredients for entertainment here is more interesting watching the Republicans not live up to their obligation to be a check and balance and let this guy keep going and going and going, because he's been nothing but entertaining every day.
Either through ignorance, through being a low information deplorable, or disillusionment, believe that things that are happening politically, institutionally at a national stage, bear little or no resemblance to what goes on in your daily existence, then yes, then the Senate, then the executive branch, then the Congress, they become far more valuable as a reality show. If you turn the halls of power into a Big Brother house, or you get that guy Andy Cohen, the guy who created the Desperate Housewives. That's as valid an interpretation of how things have gone as anything I can think of. But here's something else to consider. Everyone talks about how, like recently, Bob Woodward in interviews and other people have been talking about how, oh my God, what would happen if there was a catastrophe, kind of a big alarming event that happened. This buffoon would not be able to create a credible response, and geez, what would happen if something happened catastrophically on a national event? And they're not considering the fact that things did happen. Like, all you have to do is think about Puerto Rico, and everyone's saying, will this be, Obama's Katrina, or will this be Katrina? Trump's already had his Katrina. Trump had Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, right? And there's a very real argument to be made that the fact that a country that sings songs, hymns of praise, in fact, politically, to the idea that their the germinal event of the creation of their country was their saying this far no further against taxation without representation. Right, the British Empire taxed them but didn't give them a voice in their government, right? And they're saying, this is not fair, this will not stand, and boom, 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 right? Minutemen and Concord and Washington and 1776. But you've got at least three that I can think of, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, that pay taxes but cannot vote. Mm-hmm. Right, that is the exact definition of what the event that formed this country, or that country, in opposition to it. Sorry. So you have at the very generous expression of 1,500 to 1,600 people died, as a direct or indirect result of the first few weeks of the hurricane. And I've heard figures go as high as 2,900 if you actually roll in seniors and the disabled and the sickly and people that have died as a result of lack of access to health care and clean water and electricity, because there's a lot of places in Puerto Rico that still don't have access to the power grid. All of these are a direct result of Donald Trump's inability or lack of concern for responding effectively to his Katrina. It doesn't seem to make that much of an impact to anyone that doesn't have relatives in Puerto Rico. And how often have you heard you had that huge typhoon that just smashed Guam flat yesterday. I wonder how much news coverage that's going to get. And I didn't even think about. It wasn't until a couple of days ago that I heard about the U.S. Virgin Islands. Smash flat in Maria as well. I've never even heard anybody talk about that. There's no pop stars from the U.S. Virgin Islands apparently. Jennifer Lopez and Sonny Hostins and Pitbull and stuff like that. And there's no people doing telethons and selling songs and kind of say Puerto Rico.
Well, the next time they sell themselves as nation builders in their conquered war zones, we'll have to remember the territories and states that, as he's pointed out, the taxation without representation.
Yeah. That's Trump has already had his Katrina, and he duffed it. So anyway, that's. Wow. I'm so tired of being that sweet spot in between revulsion and alarm. That seems to be where I have been, with regards to American politics for the past 2 years, essentially. Now, I must admit, you asked about anything that I have paid attention to Canadian politics. I have to admit that I have been, to some degree, not totally, not across the board, but to some degree, Justin Trudeau has been a rising palate cleanser. I've been impressed and respectful of the way that he has handled Donald Trump, and I've been very impressed with Chrystia Freeland, who I thought was I just after she was elected, just after Justin Trudeau won the election back whenever that was, 2015, I think it was. She went down and appeared on Bill Maher. And I was not at all impressed with her. I thought, okay, you're attractive, you've got energy, but you come across as a shrill sloganeer. And I wasn't at all impressed with her at the time, but I gained some respect for her over the past weeks and months.
I noticed a tweet that somebody had quoted a press release of probably a Trump statement about the negotiations, and the person said, and I don't know if this is a quote, but it's supposed to be Trump to Freeland. Every day you show up in that sack of a dress, the tariff goes up 5%.
Really?
And I think that's just a joke. I don't think that was said to Freeland.
I don't think that was said.
It's a funny tweet. But that's funny. And would be so... That's exactly what we would sort of expect to hear from. Because, right, the way he attacks women and degrades them on superficial means.
I can see him
I thought
saying
it was funny.
That. I could see actually... What's your Ivanka?
Right.
Saying that. I don't think she's stupid enough to tweet that. I can see Donald Trump saying, kind of Chrystia Freeland, she's a 7. Right? Kind of that's. Have you heard the shift in tone there? Have you heard any adequate explanation for the words on the back of Melania Trump's coat when she came down to see the
No, I never did hear a reasonable explanation of that.
Isn't that like horrifying?
You know what I think I figured out? They did say the reason why we thought we could get away with jailing babies was that no one would care. And so now that you bring up the words on the back of her coat,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
That's psychological warfare is what that is. That just does
yeah,
not make sense.
That is. And it's horrifying because it indicates to me to no small extent that the forces that have that are animating the sock puppet that is Donald Trump have won. Really, there's if they can do something as gobsmackingly as egregious and insulting and offensive as that, as have I mean,
it's almost like a secret message. Isn't there a scene in Wag the Dog where they're sitting and he says, "Oh yeah, you want Billy to show the whatever sign?" And he makes a quick call, and next thing on TV we see him make a signal.
No, he actually he writes out he makes cuts in his sweater and spells out something in what's kind of what's that Morse code, right? Kind of I remember that movie. Yeah, he the next time he shows up on television, he's created a "I love you, Mom" message in Morse code with the cuts in his sweater that he's wearing. I can't figure out what kind of who's doing the messaging. But I know it's not Trump. I know it's no one actually in the White House. It's someone.
Well, it's Cambridge Analytica, those types of analysts.
Very
who
possibly.
have figured out how to shift demographics so they lay on top of one another.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow.
You braided. I think he braided the evangelicals and the basket of the. Well, he braided the evangelicals with the
only way to change things is to get into office. So it's the same thing with the abortion. The idea that getting someone like Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court was a 20-year process, and for these evangelicals who wanted to kill you have to join him in order to beat him. I think that there was a long-term strategy put into place, and they must have, maybe in the churches, made a deal with evangelicals that you're going to have to put up with some pretty nasty tasting medicine, but the only way we're going to get our agenda across is using these dirty.
Well, how else do you explain the evangelical support of Donald Trump? A guy who's been married 3 times and kind of been spanked by porn stars and while his kind of 4-month-old baby is waiting back in New York. How and you get it's
and why are we celebrating the military at football games? Again, I think this is part of what we're talking about. Is if you can overlap the sports nuts who only pick the news up to get the sports, Philadelphia 24 or Boston 97, to overlap with the Tea Party, to overlap with evangelicals, to overlap with the military, pro-American might people.
You don't. I think that's a fairly easy read right there, right? Kind of there are a few things as tribal as sports fans.
Find us on Twitter at @thatarcher, our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Rate the show on iTunes. It changes the way the show is listed.
CMI is brought to you today by the number 5.
Why?
In the Byward Market Bear. Because those are 5 people that have now criminal convictions in the Trump team.
5 dead in the hurricane.
Yeah, that doesn't count. I'm more interested in the hurricane in the Philippines and down in the States. That's a tropical depression now. I'm more interested in the Philippines.
Because he's apparently started talking. There's a term for it. But he started talking on Tuesday to the FBI, Manafort.
Yeah, well, I think he's probably talking a lot earlier. It's just the stuff that we haven't been told.
Well, in the court document, it said, and he had already began his cooperation.
Yeah, exactly.
Days before the plea of guilty.
Yeah.
And deal.
So I think this is something that's been in the works for a while, just like a few other things.
So who convinced him?
And then everything is released at a certain point in time.
Someone would have convinced him, because it's all a clear balance. Keep your mouth shut, maybe you get a pardon. But somebody convinced him that...
Well, $46 million, I think I heard this morning, he had to pay in fines, plus he had to turn over his... Not that you want to live there afterwards, because I don't think management would be nice to you, but he also had to turn over his condo at Trump Towers and a bunch of other things. So the irony in all that is laughable, but if not just downright despicable.
One of the things he boasted about was having a suite at the Trump Tower.
He wanted to ingratiate himself with Republican supporters and big finance people. I think that would be the word you were looking for.
Apparently, 1,300 condos at Trump properties are suspected as money laundering attempts by foreign nations.
Well, I was reading this morning. It's interesting that you say that because it's saying here that, and this is a quote from David Lionheart, page A23 in the op-ed section Monday, September 10th in the New York Times. Quote, the financially rickety Trump organization, shunned by most mainstream banks, long relied on less scrupulous Russian investors. Quote, Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets, end quote, Donald Trump Jr. said a decade ago. Quote, we have all the funding we need out of Russia, end quote, Eric Trump reportedly said in 2013. And what was the rare major bank to work with Trump? Deutsche Bank, which has a history of illegal Russian money laundering.
And one of the bank accounts, I think, that Manafort had money in was Deutsche Bank.
Deutsche Bank. Well, it says that he goes on to say that Trump also has a habit of selling real estate to Russians in all-cash deals. Money launderers like such deals because they can turn illegally earned cash into legitimate assets, usually at an inflated price that rewards the seller for the risk. One especially dubious deal was Trump's $95 million sale of a Palm Beach house to a Russian magnate in 2008 during the housing bust, only 4 years after Trump had bought the house for $41 million.
I remember that story.
Yep. So, I mean, it all goes to, to this whole thing about, he's trying to distract and he's trying to, smoke screen, obfuscate with the truth, whatever. And
too bad it took 30 years to unveil the moral majority having no morals.
I don't think anybody really can thump their chests on having the moral majority or anything. I mean, I think they're all, every party, it doesn't matter where you are around the world or what country you're referring to. I think every party is duplicitous in some sort of corruption or shady behind-the-scenes dealing, a la the Wizard of Oz. I don't, kind of like the ugly truth is being a Canadian. We think that we're all sanctimonious, that we're the best country in the world, and then all of a sudden you start to strip off the veneer, and it's like, ooh, and you try to put the veneer back on, but the glue is now gone. You can't put the veneer on, back on there again. It just slides off the wall like a bloody skinning of a cow or something like that.
Well,
so
another addendum to your pointing out, it's the fifth indictment.
Yeah.
This is the first indictment of somebody who was at the famous Trump meeting.
Well, that's all right.
And he's obligated to speak.
Yeah, well, I mean, he wants to protect his family. At the end of the day, previous to what we were stating with regards to why did Manafort do this, pardon me, he wants to protect his family.
Okay,
At
well,
least that's what his lawyers said yesterday.
What other wealth would he have left after giving up all those properties?
Dude, you know as well as I do that if we had that kind of knowledge and power, Sure, you leave whatever breadcrumbs out for the state to see. But man, I would be like the Roman coins that were just found a few weeks ago. I'd be burying money in on my property or unlisted property somewhere, for a rainy day. That cabin in the woods, that's where the most of the wealth is going to be. It's not going to be in my bank account.
Well, this is all very Sopranos sounding.
Huh. It's all very survival. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's what war. You can go back thousands of years, since we've had money. Anything that's valuable, trial and error would dictate, or survival instincts would dictate that you got to protect yourself and your family. So,
and the idea that this is the campaign chairman still has no meaning.
Yeah, no, I've known quite a few campaign chairmen that were crooked. Doesn't matter what party. So, I think it's just human. I think it's just human nature. I really, honestly, man, if you're due to psychological profile on all parties, all people, it doesn't matter. I'm sorry to say, I know that sounds really cynical, but I mean.
The other thing I forgot or didn't realize was Manafort and Trump had always been in a joint defense agreement.
Okay. Expand on it?
And Giuliani spat that up earlier last week.
Okay.
Which, again, why would he, what kind of lawyer would say that? But, so that means that there was constant coordination between, any idea that Trump has forgotten about Manafort, or maybe there isn't a backdoor discussion method for talking about pardons, etc.
Yeah.
If they have a joint defense agreement, and I kind of touched on this earlier, at what point did who convince Manafort that he can't count on a pardon from Trump? And certainly here's your backdoor channel of communication if they have a joint defense agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, any of those conversations, which in a sense probably is jury tampering, which is one of the other things Manafort was guilty of. That's why he's still in jail now, right? They rescinded his bail because he was actually sending secret messages using complicated methods like, rather than send you an email, I'll give you the username and password from my email account, and then you read it. Like remember that?
Yeah, go to my Dropbox account. All the information that you need to get out of the country secretly with your family will be there.
So he's got this backdoor communication with Trump, joint defense agreement.
Well, I mean, everything's possible, but I mean, would you, at the end of the day, knowing everything that you know about Trump, if you were him, would you trust him? Just saying, man. On the surface, I mean,
somebody spoke to him, because all along, up until Tuesday of last week, Manafort seemed to be not cooperating, and in exchange for a pardon, we were all led to believe.
And again, I think Manafort is scared. There's something that is incendiary that maybe this 40% of people who voted for him, which is really not a lot, maybe they'd be even worried. They're worried that that's going to kick it down to 12%. Because it's so incendiary.
Could this decision be based on poll numbers? That it was poll numbers on Tuesday that had Manafort change his tune? Because if the midterms are going to be dominated by a Democratic overturn of the House and Senate, then it's a path down the road to impeachment. He may not have time to pardon Manafort.
Well, never say never. I mean, I learned that a long time ago.
Okay. There's a lot going on this week, despite... Okay.
Yeah.
So let me bounce some stuff off you.
Yeah, sure.
All right. You don't want to hear about the hurricane. But
I do. I mean, I have stuff all highlighted, and like I said, I've gone through all... pretty much have a New York Times from every day this week, so with the exception of yesterday.
But one of the things that came up this week was a Senator Markley on the Appropriations Committee released documents showing that funds were diverted from FEMA to ICE this summer.
I have that right here.
Okay, so from FEMA to jail babies or caged brown people. But then a day later, it turns out another $29 million was transferred from the Coast Guard, the very people who are fishing people out of the sea right now, to ICE. So he just went through his little budget list looking for any possible ways to funnel more money to ICE, and probability has it that his buddies are the people who rented the warehouse space and bought all the galvanized fencing. You'd like to follow that money?
Yeah, sure. I'd like to follow that money, but let's just not, let's not blow this out of proportion. I mean, FEMA's budget is $25 billion annually, so, that's just not even a pimple drop, So, I mean,
okay.
It's $25 billion, man. I mean, that's more than our GDP, I think. No, well, I'm being stupid there, but I mean...
I thought I heard somebody explaining how certain parts of their budget are in locked accounts for specific tasks, and that these monies may have been for logistics. But okay.
Well, I mean, it does say here that the transfer was part of a more than $200 million in funds that were transferred from the Department of Homeland Security and moved to ICE's detention and removal. But it also shows that it went to Customs and Border Protection. Yeah, it was only about $10 million. That's what the first paragraph is. So out of a $25 billion account, I mean...
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Totally off topic now. 2 U.S. F-22 Raptor fighter jets intercepted 2 Russian Tu-95 bombers on Tuesday, according to NORAD.
Oh, they're still doing that? Really? I didn't know about that.
Just weird.
Where was this, over Alaska or off the coast of Washington State, Oregon, or Hawaii, Guam?
Don't know. There's too much information. Okay, how are the insurance companies going to do in this whole hurricane?
Oh, well, anybody who has insurance, I'm not one of them.
Hurricane insurance?
Well, no. I mean, I think...
Natural flood? Act of God insurance?
Insurance companies are like telecom companies. They're affiliated with pedophiles and the devil, right? And I can see this happening right now. So one of the things that they've been leaving out, I only heard this on one show earlier this week. Probably there's more pigs there than there are people. But in Tar Heel, North Carolina, they slaughter 32,000 pigs a day. And it's the largest slaughtering facility of pigs in the United States. And that they have a cesspool, or whatever they call it, a lagoon for all the waste and blood and the feces and the urine and the baby piglets that are aborted because the pigs are so scared.
Is this the story where they spray it in
black
communities?
Yeah, I heard something about that as well, but I mean, I'm not. That's not what we're focusing on here. We're focusing on the fact that there's an environmental disaster in the making here. So you got it's huge slaughtering facilities in North Carolina, dealing with pigs, dealing with chickens, dealing with cows, dealing with horses, and so you have these huge wastewater ponds that are bursting at the seams already. And then you also have you probably know more about this than I do, the leftovers of the coal fire plants, the toxic coal ash, are also buried on all over the place. And so I guess with 1,000 millimeters of rain that they're anticipating, or they're getting right now, this is the calamity that they're worried about, because North Carolina, as I said in the production meeting on Wednesday, is a very, very, very hilly with the Appalachian Mountains and by the border with Alabama and all that. So shit travels down, and so you're going to have all this flooding from the ocean, the storm surge, but you're also going to have all the stuff that's coming from these huge places like Tar Heel.
I should have this number, but it was, I thought I put it in my notes, but I think it's something like there's 8 nuclear dump sites and 6 nuclear plants.
You know, I'm talking about open lagoons with over 2 million liters of raw sewage. I mean, they're not behind triple containment shielded doors and stuff like that. I mean, that's, barrels. I mean, this is like open lagoons of waste, of sewage. I mean, this is going to contaminate people's homes. I mean, even worse, forget about the hurricane. If the house hasn't been splintered by 100-kilometer-an-hour winds or by a storm surge of 10 feet or whatever it is, even if you think you could get your house back up and your property nice and safe, you got toxic coal ash, you have toxic sewer sludge, from all these processed slaughtered animals. I don't know, man. Right. I'm not so worried about nuclear as opposed to everything else that's going on there.
I hope you're right. Okay, here's the other weird story that happened this week is the cop coming home to the wrong apartment.
Oh, shit. Okay, well, you didn't have that in our production meeting notes. Yeah, I have something here about that. This sounds like a real bright cop, eh? She goes to the wrong apartment and then shoots the poor guy. I hope she gets a death penalty for that one.
Well, now they've found all kinds of stuff in his apartment.
Well, so what? It's an illegal search and seizure. What the fuck? You can't do that. If you don't have a warrant for the stuff that you find, as far as I know, in the United States.
Okay, look, I got a
No. Hold on a second.
So, they do a broad spectrum of what they're looking for when they get these search warrants, Schultz said. Now, toxicology is important both with Officer Geyer and Mr. Jean, because it could explain how this case happened, how things went so south so quickly. By law, a warrant must be executed within 72 hours when it was issued, as far as the timing of the return of the court, nearly a week later. There's nothing nefarious about it, I think. It just got done, Schultz said. this warrant.
Yeah, well...
So they got a warrant, and they went in, and they found a tiny bit of weed, and...
Oh, wow,
couple shell casings and something else.
Wow, shell casings in a country that legalizes guns, right?
But let me ask you this.
Bullets and ammunition? I mean, no, I'm just going to...
Wouldn't you have to have the same carpet, the same colored walls? Wouldn't the house have to smell? He had to leave the front door unlocked? She's a trained police officer.
Yeah, well, that's what doesn't make any sense.
She turns the knob and finds her front door isn't locked? Doesn't notice it's a different lamp by the front hallway? Different shoes on the floor at the front door?
Sense.
Didn't a story like this happen? Like, I don't know if I'm going to say 15 years ago.
She looks like a little white
that's
supremacist.
The first thing
I'm just looking at her picture right now. She looks like a little white...
I was at a client's place when that story broke and they had the TV on, and that's the first thing I said is she looks like she does not like brown people.
Yeah, well, anyways, she sounds like I don't think they train their cops in the States. It's like that 12-year-old boy being shot in Ohio, and then the cops got away with it. So, I mean, I think they hire anybody who's fit to slaughter a cow or a pig or a chicken, and they make them police officers in the States. I mean... But
wasn't there a story 15, 20 years ago about somebody coming home to the wrong... So that sort of sounds like a National Enquirer thing, but somebody coming home to the wrong place, and I mean, if all the townhouses look the same, again, I haven't seen a photo of where these people live, or it's supposed to be an apartment. I'm just saying, it's pretty weird, no? And somebody was suggesting that they planted evidence.
Having worked at City TV and having seen my black colleagues being harassed and roughed up by the Toronto police, I am not surprised by what's going on in the United States. And again, I'll reiterate and underscore what I said. After 2 police officers shot and killed a 12-year-old boy with a play gun, they didn't de-escalate the situation or anything else like that. I am not surprised. And the further segue into this, which is totally contradictory of what we're talking about, on Wednesday when I was out shopping, I witnessed a guy stealing about $60 to $100 worth of meat, throwing it in his knapsack. When I approached the store assistant manager and I said, "Hey, man, you might want to do something about this," the guy looked at me and said, "So?" And I said, "Where the hell's your security? Obviously, you're not the right person to talk to about this. You don't take your job seriously." He goes, "We have no security." And I said, "Really?" I said, "So the fact that I just am watching a guy for the last 10 minutes robbing you guys, you're not going to do anything about it?" He goes, "No." And I said, "Okay, well, as a consumer that's affected by this, this is not right." And he goes, "Well, we're tired of having our lives threatened, and our store policy now is not to do anything about this." So I went outside and I spoke to the manager. He was having a cigarette. And I said, "When do you guys intend to grow any balls?" And he looks at me and goes, "I beg your pardon?" I explained the whole story to him, and he was there having a cigarette with another of his colleagues. And the manager didn't say anything. He was just staring at me. He just had this look. And the other guy
I think as soon as you said balls, you know.
Yeah, well, I totally. Yeah. Well, you know
crazy
something.
Person.
You know something. I couldn't give a flying fuck. You know, as a consumer.
Did you name the store?
No, I won't name the store. But it's downtown. It's in my neighborhood. And so the other guy that he was having a cigarette with said, "Look, we've had our lives threatened too many times." And I explained to him I used to do store security a long time ago and that we'd had to go after people. And I gave two examples of very stressful situations where our lives were threatened. And he said, "Well, no, it's now store policy." And I said, "Well, as a consumer, I'm outraged. You know, you don't excuse mental health issues or poverty for stealing a bunch of steaks and, you know, these huge platters of chicken and tossing them in your knapsack. I mean, this is just not right. You know, we have food banks for that. We're right by 3 different homeless shelters, like kitty corner to a homeless shelter to the north side. And so it was very, 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 very sad to see that here in Ottawa, at least, they're now. I spoke to another store owner actually, just over on Bank Street, and he said, "No, we arrested about 2 or 3 people a day." And he said, "I'm really surprised that person said that. He said, "You must not have been speaking to an assistant manager or manager." And I said, "Oh no." It was on their name tag. I just wanted to find out from you what your policy is, because the manager and the assistant manager of this particular store were saying that this was the policy of their store and also their competitor just down the street. So,
it's interesting.
That's how bad crime has gotten here in Ottawa, where the stores are no longer doing anything about it, with the exception of a few other ones that actually do have balls. So that's how bad things are getting. So, you know, social assistance, whatever, you know, open heroin injection sites, you know, people stealing things, you know, but people like myself, you know, there's no leg to stand on.
Let me play, I have a couple of clips, and we'll see how this goes. I think it went pretty well last week, but who knows?
Well, may he rest in peace. You know, I mean, after seeing that movie as a kid, I never looked at camping the same or going to rural areas the same, you know. So, even though he might have liked that, you know, as his best movie that he'd ever done, it kind of reminds me of Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking of it more in terms of Trump supporters, but you've picked it up as a salute to Burt Reynolds. Okay, yeah. All right. Let's see. We got a few Trumps. We got a couple Woodwards.
Sure.
Here's Trump.
The job that FEMA and law enforcement and everybody did working along with the governor in Puerto Rico, I think, was tremendous. I think that Puerto Rico was an incredible, unsung success.
The 2,975 people would say that, you know, Trump and his unprecedented great job, and then blaming, you know, quote unquote, the incompetent mayor of San Juan. I think it really, you know, this little, you know, praise and denunciation all within the same paragraph kind of just shows where Trump's brain is that he's so quick to congratulate himself, which is incredibly narcissistic and petty and whatever else you want to add to it. But then in the same breath blaming the mayor of San Juan. Well, the mayor of San Juan doesn't have control over the Jones Act. The mayor of San Juan doesn't have control over all the different things from healthcare to electricity and what have you. The mayor is the mayor is the mayor. So the fact that Trump decided to pick a fight with the mayor as opposed to the governor or the representatives or the congressmen or congresspeople just shows how stupid Trump is.
Here's another one.
Incredibly successful. Puerto Rico was actually our toughest one of all because it's an island. I actually think it was one of the best jobs that's ever been done with respect to what this is all about.
Try not to throw up.
Yeah, goes without saying.
One of the best jobs?
Well, here's
Here's
what he said when he found out that the World Trade Center had fallen.
It was the second tallest building on Manhattan, and it was actually, before the World Trade Center, was the tallest. And then when they built the World Trade Center, it became known as the second tallest, and now it's the tallest.
Okay, Trump's nature to speak with hyperbole is great for us. We're amazing, and I'm getting so tired of this guy and his administration.
Here's Woodward on the steel tariffs, which we were talking about in a previous episode.
We use in the Pentagon for the military 1/2 of 1% of the steel in this country. There will be plenty. We are not going to run out of steel. There's not a national security argument for this. But Trump's got it in his head that tariffs are good things and that you can win this tariff war.
Self-explanatory. Geez.
Okay, here's another one. Yeah. This is the last of the Woodwards.
Mm-hmm. He told Bob Costa and myself 2.5 years ago when we're discussing power, which of course that's what the presidency is about, isn't it? And what's real power? And Obama had said some things about real power being not using violence. And we asked Trump about that, and he finally said, well, real power is, I hate to use the word, I don't like to use the word fear. And this was in Trump Tower.
Well, I mean, Canada's been on the receiving end of this, ever since he threw Trudeau under the bus and called Canada a horrible country and Trudeau a horrible person. And he said that he could, in 2 different speeches in 2 weeks, he said that he'll destroy Canada. But he doesn't want to destroy Canada, but he will destroy Canada to get what he wants. Well, ruin, whatever. It's just hype. It's just semantics.
He actually said ruination. Okay, Canada would be in a state of ruination.
Well, anyway,
I don't even know if that's a word.
It's the same thing, the same goal, destroying Canada. So, I mean...
Fear, though, that is interesting, because that kind of makes a lot of sense. Everything he does terrifies liberals, scares... I mean, that's what he... I keep wondering about this guy's childhood. I really do.
This guy is becoming really boring, and his administration and his people. I mean, it's really boring because it's so predictable. It's like a Star Wars movie, or it's like an Avengers movie. You know what's going to happen. It's predictable. It's a show about nothing. And Trump is exactly like that. A show about nothing. It's all hyperbole. Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to ruin you. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Oh, whatever. Fuck off. This week's headlines. Why aren't we talking about... can we talk about something Canadian for once instead of focusing on these assholes?
No.
Why aren't we talking about Maxime Bernier? Why aren't we talking about the gas pipeline?
Ask
why
yourself
aren't you? You're
that
the
question.
fucking producer.
Come on.
You know? Why aren't we talking about... why aren't we talking about the microwave attacks on... does everybody seem to forget that the United States developed a passive... What do they call it? It was back in the 1990s. A passive denial system or something like that, which uses sonic or microwaves to focus in on demonstrators, and then they send a short, I think I remember hearing about this, that the heat that this microwave or sonic weapon that was developed by the military is just gives you enough heat like touching a hot light bulb. Okay? And that was in the 1990s. So the fact that Marr or whoever this clown is going on about this,
I cut that out. He just mentioned in his show what you talked about, which is the Cuban, the attack on the diplomat.
This is the classic American thing of our shit does not smell. You know, it's like, this is why I'm so amazed, you know, and I sound like a broken fucking record, and I hate this, but I mean, it's just this podcast. We keep on focusing on this stuff. But I'm going to say it again. The fact that the Americans are thumping their chests and blaming the Russians for all sorts of whatever on Trump or somehow subverting the election. What the fuck has the CIA been doing since the 1940s around the world?
Yeah. Well, what if the focus is on... Hang on, the focus... We're not all that pissed off at the Russians. We're pissed off at Trump for colluding.
I am pissed off. I'm pissed off at America because of hypocrites. I'm pissed off at Obama because of hypocrites. I can still picture in my mind's eye, they're dragging the American ambassador of Libya out of the consulate in Benghazi, and his body hasn't even got rigor mortis in it, and you can see the burning of the consulate in the background. So Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Obama, they're no better than Trump. This is what I've been trying to say. They're fucking hypocrites. And everybody is lapping it up like a bunch of kittens at a cream bowl, you know? And, Trump is this, Trump. No. Your country is this. So you're in bed with the Russians, you're in bed with the Chinese, and you've been in bed with all these despots for decades. Just like the Russians, just like the Chinese, just like the right, the left, the extremists, whether it be in religion or in politics, these people are a cancer. Maybe it's a 38-degree humidity outside right now, but I'm so sick and tired of all of this.
No new facts on Cuba, right?
Oh, fuck. No.
Okay. What was the other story you said? Why aren't we talking about...
Why aren't we talking about Ford? Why aren't we talking about the Notwithstanding clause?
Yeah. Well,
why aren't we talking about the fact that you're not going to be able to vote on October 22nd because you got some dictator, crack addict, drug dealer for your next door neighbor who won't let you have an election because he's got some petty little bullshit to deal with the city council. Okay.
Why aren't we talking about that party, the new offshoot of the Conservative Party in the federal level?
They're just, why aren't we talking about that?
Why aren't we talking about that?
I don't know, man. You're the producer. I'm just following you. I am just following you.
You mean why am I not talking about it? Or why are you not talking about it?
I'm just saying.
This is a new segment.
Yeah.
Why are we not talking about?
Because people don't care. What is it? What the last provincial election? I think what is it? Only 40% of the people showed up.
If you're not talking about it, take responsibility. You're the one who's not talking about it.
Well, let's see. Ford was elected by 40% of the people. But he's saying because he's been voted in that he can take the unprecedented step of invoking the Notwithstanding clause and really, I mean, it's only been around since 81, 82, right?
The purpose of the Notwithstanding clause was so that premiers could object to federal interpretation of their violating our Charter of Rights by supporting one language over another. So my question is, how is the municipal election related to a federal... The Notwithstanding clause was a clause that I thought was invoked by Quebec between the provincial government and the federal government.
Yeah, because they wanted to have their little racist whatever...
So how is the Notwithstanding clause being invoked between the provincial government and the municipal government?
Look, I mean, I think even the liberal person that represents my riding, she's a law professor. I think she was the head of law or whatever, the dean of law at the University of Ottawa, just 4 blocks from me. And she even said that what Ford was doing, I could be taking this out of, I could be misquoting her here, but I think she even said that it's not even applicable for and it was not even designed for what Doug Ford is doing.
That's what I just said.
So, well, I'm just backing it up with what a constitutional expert.
Sure.
So, but I mean, Ford has said that he's going to use it again.
So all he's done is do what Trump does, is just take the name of something and rebrand it, redesign it.
Yep.
He's not invoking, quote, the notwithstanding clause. He's invented a new one that applies to him getting retribution for how Toronto City Council dealt with his brother, Rob.
Oh, well, he's, Well,
Would you agree with that? That this is... Now, let me ask you a question. Was it not you, several episodes ago, who said that Rob Ford had gone to L.A. and found out that actually where we have 50 and he's proposing to reduce our number of councillors representing our city to 20-something, didn't they go to L.A. and he came back as his main justification for this being that L.A. actually has 20 representatives for comparable.
I think it was us. Yeah, we were discussing that. Yeah.
Right, and you said that the truth is that those people represent smaller wards, and that actually it's 97 representatives for a comparable city.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds like you?
I think so. I'm not going to say 100% because, hey...
Just say yes. Yeah. Yes.
No, I'm not going to say yeah for something I'm not
I'll let it in another time where you said yes. And
Okay. Well, I mean, anyways, the notwithstanding clause, from what I understand, was only supposed to be something that was to be temporary. So, I'm not too sure what Bill 5 is going to do. I mean, okay, they want to align them with the federal and provincial ridings, and $25 million they want to save. But I mean, I really don't.
What's a premier doing meddling in municipal election gerrymandering?
No, it's just a petty thing. He hated it, and he and his brother, hated city council. Everybody else on that council hated Rob Ford and Doug Ford, right? I remember them bullying their way and pushing their way through the city council and seeing the news footage.
Didn't he push women over in council?
Oh, yeah, he pushed, yeah. So, I mean, this guy, watch what happens. He's exactly like Max Bernier. Max Bernier wants to privatize healthcare. Max Bernier wants to restrict immigration. Max Bernier wants to restrict refugees. Max Bernier wants to abolish the supply management. He wants to do everything that the right-wing extremists in Europe, or what's his name in Hungary, Sweden, Italy, Austria, France, they want just to destroy everything. So, and unfortunately, Max Bernier, what was it, 3 or 4 ballots, 15 ballots or something like that, he could have been the next party, head of the Conservative Party, a member of the official opposition leader. So there's strong support in Canada for this, my friend.
So it's made Canada great again. Go back to the 1850s.
Canada was never great. What are you talking about? We're a rump of the United States and England.
Okay, I'm making a joke, and you're
I've never seen us as being a great
me.
country. I've never ask a certain group of friends of ours whose families have been interned by the Canadian government because they were of a certain persuasion.
I'm going to edit this. So you're going to just sound so happy and complacent with the calm state of.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, don't.
All right.
Don't.
Headlines.
I mean, I don't.
I want you to find your happy place.
There's no headlines. We've touched on everything. I got orange markers and highlighters and little...
That was your segment. It was 3 episodes running. You listed through fast bang, bang, bang headlines. It was awesome. That was a thing, man.
Well, we covered them all today, though, with the hurricanes and everything.
You mean I brought them up?
Yeah, you brought them
Just
all up.
on
We covered everything. It was good. This was from Gallup. Which of these statements best describes your view of Trump and the Russian officials' involvement with the 2016 presidential campaign? What Trump did was illegal, 29%. What Trump did was not illegal but unethical, 27% said that. Nothing seriously wrong, 35%. No opinion, 9%. Next question. Which of these best describes your view of Trump and the two women to whom money was paid during his 2016 presidential campaign? What Trump did was illegal, 31%. Not illegal, but unethical, 37%. Nothing seriously wrong, 23%. No opinion, 9%. How is it that over 80 houses blew up and caught fire, killing an 18-year-old and having the mass evacuation of 3 towns north of Boston? Was it hackers that dropped the pressure or upped the pressure in the gas line?
So many questions. How long did it remain high? Were they able to lower it? Notice that's the missing element of the news story, is how this happened.
Yeah.
Why would that be withheld? It sounds like a national security issue. I think you've accidentally sort of hit on it. I think we're going to find out that it probably was tampering.
Hackers?
Yeah. Why else wouldn't there be a working explanation?
Well, I mean, that's the only thing I could think of. I mean, when I heard the story last night, just putting together, parsing together.
If it was Russian, right? A Russian hacking thing. Because they've been talking about this in nuclear, they've been talking about this for years.
I would say it's the Islamic State.
Well, hang on. Let's just say it's the Russians. Because this fits into why there would be no public statements about it. Just like the microwaving of the Cuban embassy, it's suspected that it's Russians, and because of Trump's affinity to the Russian mob, that's why they're so quiet. But in terms of terrorism, if it was a country, and if the purpose of terrorism is to affect public policy by terrorizing the populace, then that's what you would do, is prevent any information that linked the effect with the cause.
Well, I think it's Columbia gas, if I'm not, I could be mistaken, but Columbia gas apparently was mute on what had happened, and so the Fed's Homeland Security, I think it was, took over, or Homeland Insecurity took over, and the un-United States of American government, other agencies are also involved as well. So, like you said, I think the lack of response from all levels of government, including the company, the gas company,
is telling.
Would certainly suggest that it was terrorism.
Okay. Well, it's at least telling of it being there being something more than
the non-answer answer.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this: how many houses blew up?
Over 80.
That's a chunk of change in terms of liability.
Oh, yeah.
And then personal lawsuits or any loss of livelihood, but just based on the value of 80 homes, then the contents and or any loss of income or disruption to business operations as a result of damages caused by, any loss of life, any medical bills, and other liabilities, damaged vehicles. Like when you add it up, that might be a chunk of change. You start asking questions like, because we know what happens in Canada if you have a lac mégantic or whatever, when there's a corporate liability, first thing you do is stop talking about it.
Yep.
Second of all, you declare bankruptcy. And third of all, who knows? Well, only know 2 moves in the playbook. Do they have $100 million handy to pay liability? And if they are insured for their corporate liability, we all know that there's going to be clauses. And so if it was like criminal disregard or there's going to be a few clauses wherein their insurance might not kick in for their liability.
Right.
And, and maybe that's why they're keeping so quiet, is they haven't figured out how they're going to pay for all this. They're figuring out ways to make the ratepayers pay for it all, right? I mean, ultimately, even if they had insurance, the ratepayers end up paying the insurance premiums. But this does feed into the deeper issue of corporate liability in an accident and what the playbook is on public disclosure, information that may later taint any litigation.
Well, I mean, it's like with the only rail line going up to the Arctic, or not Arctic, but up to Churchill, Manitoba. Once owned by the feds, then owned by a private consortium out of the United States, and then, we have that rainstorm last year, and then all of a sudden the only way to get into a town is train or plane or ship is all of a sudden the only land link is for lack of a better word, is wiped off the map, and the company just doesn't want to deal with it, doesn't want to spend $110 million to fix it up, and then a whole community ends up dying because of the fiducial responsibility of a company, of a corporation. They just want to walk away, and then thank God, I think it's Fairfax Financial out of Toronto, just south of you there, and a consortium of other shareholders purchased the line, and I think the federal government has now agreed to put in $110 million to fix it before the winter. So they'll have a rail line once again back to Churchill, Manitoba. But it's just amazing that these corporations can come in and under the auspices of, we're creating jobs, we're giving taxes to the community. But really, at the end of the day, they're there to exploit. Today's podcast is brought to you by the number 5 and the Byward Market Bear.
Yeah, we caught that earlier. What is the Byward Market Bear?
We had a black bear 2 blocks from here climb into a tree. And so far we've had 44 sightings of black bears over in Quebec this week, over in Gatineau, right across the river.
Wonder what's up.
So, they're saying it's because of the drought we've had this summer. So they're coming down from the forests. The Gatineau Park, basically, if you remember being here in Ottawa last time, Gatineau Park, with the exception of a couple of kilometers, almost extends down to the Ottawa River, save for a couple of buildings or whatever. So they think that they're coming down because there's not enough berries in the woods and whatever they need to eat. So they're coming down here.
Find us on Twitter @thatarcher. Send us an email, archer@twxnet.com. For guest links and contact info, visit our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Find us on Android and Apple Podcast apps. Subscribe and rate the show on iTunes.
I'm Dave Archer.
I'm Ian Stolberg.
And I'm Kevin Weber in the Beaches.